Forward. For decades, the official narrative has been etched into our history books. Some 7 million years ago, an ape-like ancestor stood upright, beginning the long, slow, arduous climb of human evolution. We are taught that the path from the first crudely chipped stone spearhead to the microchip took millions of years, a glacial pace dictated by the blind forces of natural selection. It took hominids over 2 million years to simply refine the shape of a rock tool. Yet, approximately 300,000 years ago, with the emergence of Homo sapiens, something inexplicable happened. The evolutionary clock didn't just speed up, it shattered. Technology and civilization accelerated at a dizzying, illogical rate. We went from ancient megalithic sites like Göbekli Tepe to landing probes on other planets in less than 30,000 years. The question that hangs, silent and inconvenient, over every museum exhibit and textbook is this: how could mankind evolve so fast? The alternative history proposed by certain fringe researchers suggests a shocking answer. We didn't evolve at all. We were engineered. The ancient Sumerian texts, the Egyptian religions, Native American legends, and even the Christian Bible, they all tell the same forbidden story. They speak of a race of far superior beings, often referred to as the Annunaki, who descended from the heavens. We were purpose-built, the perfect, resilient slave race designed to toil and build for our masters. This theory presents inconvenient truths that official history struggles to account for. Why do global myths uniformly describe a sudden, devastating great flood, a catastrophic reset, which seems less like a natural disaster and more like a deliberate act of destruction aimed at eliminating a failed or rebellious project? Why do certain ancient texts contain cryptic numerical references, such as the code Biaskara 51, hinting at a hidden agenda or a control mechanism embedded deep within the foundations of our civilization? Official history paints a picture of glorious, self-made progress. But what if that progress is merely a return to pre-programmed capabilities? What if the collective memory of humanity is not about gods, but about masters? And what if the very drive that makes Americans, and all free people, strive for independence and innovation is not an inherent trait, but a glitch in the slave coding? The official record asks us to believe in chance. The alternative record demands we look for design. The unsettling truth, hidden in plain sight, is that we might be listening to the faint echo of our creators, a signal that has spanned millennia. Two men in the desolate quiet of the Nevada desert are about to tune into that signal and face the ultimate test of human will, the right to self-determination. Chapter 1. The Frequency of the Whispering Sky. The Nevada desert, a scorched canvas of sandstone and sagebrush, stretched for 100 miles in every direction, absorbing the relentless summer sun. Robert Bob Clark, 46 years old and looking 10 years older thanks to 3 tours in the Air Force and too much bad coffee, felt every degree of the 110-degree Fahrenheit heat even inside the heavily fortified subterranean bunker he called his office. He wasn't guarding nuclear secrets anymore. He was guarding cosmic silence. His post, a covert satellite communication array near an unnamed salt flat, was built for listening. Bob, the chief operator for the night shift, treated the surveillance room like a sanctuary of solitude. The banks of equipment, humming softly in the chill of the forced air conditioning, looked like the bridge of a starship, but they were tuned to the deepest, most boring corners of the universe. His routine was sacrosanct: black coffee from a thermal mug, a quick check of the deep space telemetry, and settling in for a long, quiet night of white noise. Another night, another billion light years of static, Bob muttered, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead.
He wore a crisp, faded denim shirt, a subtle act of rebellion against the uniform policy, and his eyes, perpetually narrowed from decades of looking into blinding screens, scanned the scrolling data streams. His sense of humor, a blend of dry Texan wit and veteran cynicism, was his only companion. The silence was the enemy, the constant, monotonous hum of the cosmos, confirming nothing of interest. It was the backdrop to the great American experiment, the noise against which we built our cities, wrote our laws, and claimed our freedom. Bob, a staunch patriot, whose family had served the flag for generations, felt a quiet, profound pride in his nation's endless quest for truth, even if the truth was just more static. At precisely 01:17 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, the static shivered. Bob, who'd been staring at a grainy photo of his daughter in his wallet, instantly snapped his attention back to the monitor. The waveform monitor, usually a chaotic scribble of noise, displayed a sudden, crisp anomaly. It wasn't a burst, not a pulse, and definitely not natural. It was a rhythm, a clean, repeating sequence of tones, separated by perfectly timed silences. It was the sound of intentionality. He snatched the headset, dialing the frequency on the spectrum analyzer. The sound filtering into his ears was low-pitched, almost musical, like a repeating bass note played on a gigantic distant synthesizer. It was too clean, too regular to be anything known to science. Not radar, not a classified military satellite, and certainly not a deep space maser. He nicknamed it immediately, the Whispering Sky. Just as he was about to log the unprecedented event, the heavy steel door hissed open, flooding the room with the harsher yellow light of the hallway. Standing there was Dr. Catherine Reed, fresh out of MIT with the triple major in cryptography and Semitic languages. She was young, fiercely intellectual, and wore her skepticism like a shield. She had arrived 3 hours ago and was already making rounds, challenging Bob's comfort zone. "Mr. Clark, I'm reviewing your log entry from 2200. Your gain setting on the 1.7 GHz band is 6 decibels higher than the protocol permits. Is there a technical justification for that, or is this just Bob's magic frequency?" Bob removed the headset slowly, placing it on the console. His usual annoyance at bureaucratic rigor was replaced by the adrenaline of the moment. "Dr. Reed, welcome to the night shift. You're just in time. That gain setting saved my rear end. Listen to this." He switched the sound from his headset to the room's external monitor. The low, rhythmic pulse filled the chilled space. Kat frowned, adjusting her glasses. She walked directly to the analyzer screen, her eyes moving over the spectral density display. "I hear noise, Mr. Clark, possibly interference from the tertiary cooling pumps. We're in the middle of a desert, not the deep ocean. Atmospheric propagation." "No," Bob interrupted, his voice low and firm. He pointed a calloused finger at the screen, directly at the perfectly regular peaks. "Atmospheric propagation is messy. Pumps are periodic, but not like that. Look at the timing. That's a signal, doctor, and it's not from anything we built. It's too clean, too efficient. It's a drumbeat from outside." Kat's expression remained stubbornly unconvinced. She typed a quick command into a secondary terminal, running a spectral analysis. "Mr. Clark, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Based on the Doppler shift and the decay ratio, it's most likely a highly stabilized atmospheric artifact reflecting off the D layer, perhaps interacting with the residual ionized plasma from the recent solar flare activity." She said the last part with the easy confidence of someone who had never seen the rules of physics bend in real time. "It's not a reflection, doctor. It's a call." Bob leaned back, crossing his arms. He knew better to argue physics with a fresh MIT graduate, so he appealed to the core of American scientific inquiry, the pursuit of the unknown. "Look, I've been sitting in this 15 million facility for 8 years. I've heard everything. Soviet subs, busted Chinese satellites, and more space debris than you'll find in a junkyard. This is different. The signal feels purposeful." Kat sighed, running her hand through her short, dark hair. Purposeful is what we want to hear, Mr. Clark. It's what drives every conspiracy theory from Area 51 to the flat Earth. I'm here to deal in the measurable, the verifiable. I'm running a 24-hour filter on this frequency. If it repeats with this perfect rhythm outside the expected atmospheric decay window, then and only then we log it as an unidentified anomaly. She gave him a tight, professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. Bob knew he'd lost the bureaucratic battle. The paper trail demanded skepticism, but as the rhythmic sound of the whispering sky pulsed faintly in the quiet room, Bob reached into his locker and pulled out a small, worn, leather-bound book, a reproduction of ancient Sumerian glyphs. He knew the truth wouldn't be found in Doppler shifts. It was hidden in the ancient echoes of human memory. The signal faded slightly as the atmospheric conditions shifted, but the rhythmic nature was undeniable. Bob looked from the screen to the book, a chilling thought forming. What if the code wasn't new, but simply the sound of a very old timer finally ringing?
Chapter 2. Patterns in Sandstone. The next day, the desert silence had returned, but the tension between Bob and Kat had not. Bob sat at his console, replaying the compressed audio file of the whispering sky signal. The rhythm was hypnotic, a precise digital beat that defied the messy reality of the cosmos. Kat, meanwhile, was buried in a stack of printouts, cross-referencing global atmospheric models. She had traded her crisp formal wear for a comfortable t-shirt and jeans, a small concession to the long hours. She needed to prove him wrong, not because she disliked him, but because the alternative was too professionally dangerous. "It's a harmonic wave, Bob," Kat announced, pushing a printout across the console. "It's stable, yes, but its properties still align with a known, albeit rare, ionospheric ducting phenomenon. You're just hearing a ghost in the machine." Bob looked up from his Sumerian book, the text filled with stories of sky people descending to Earth. He spoke with the quiet conviction of a man who'd seen too much to believe in coincidence. "Dr. Reed, you're an expert in cryptography. Let's talk patterns, not phenomena. When did Homo sapiens suddenly decide to become architects and astronomers? 300,000 years ago, we're knuckle-dragging cave-painting primitives. Then, boom, civilization. Suddenly, we're building pyramids with stones weighing 2.5 million pounds and mapping constellations." He used the American measure of weight, emphasizing the sheer scale of the engineering. Kat scoffed, sipping lukewarm coffee. "That's not a signal, Bob. That's just the natural acceleration of intelligence. We learn to walk and then we learn to run." "No. We learned to walk for 7 million years, and then someone else strapped a rocket to our backs. The ancient texts, the ones you specialized in, all agree. The gods, the Annunaki, they didn't teach us, they made us. We were engineered slaves for their mining and building operations. That explains the jump. It wasn't evolution, it was product launch." This intellectual sparring, taking place in the fluorescent cold of a high-tech bunker, was their strange form of intellectual intimacy. Kat, the pragmatist, found herself slightly intrigued by his passion. "Okay, Bob, let's play your game. If we're engineered slaves, what does the signal mean? Is it a work assignment?" she asked, a smirk playing on her lips. "It's a ping," Bob said, his expression serious. "A status check. The slave drivers went home, or maybe they just went remote. They left us with built-in programming, the drive to build, to toil, to fight endless battles, but they also left a back door." He turned back to the rhythmic sound, and then to a specific passage in the Sumerian text. "Look at the rhythm. 6 beats, pause. 5 beats, pause. 1 beat. 6, 5, 1. Now look at this glyph combination. The ancient scholars call it
the master's mark. Kat leaned in, her cryptographer's mind immediately focused on the structure. She pulled up the compressed signal data and started running a Fourier analysis. The sequence was undeniable. A highly structured, almost musical signature of 651 within the pulse. "It's a pattern," she conceded, tapping the screen. "But why should a random frequency in the desert relate to some obscure numerology in a cuneiform text?" "It doesn't," Bob said, pushing a second, even older document toward her. A copy of an ancient biblical commentary. "This does. The scholars who translated this believe they found a key in the book of Genesis chapter 51, a hidden code, a number assigned to the first engineered generation. They called it Bia Skara 51. Kat froze. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "A code inside the Bible? That's pure fantasy, Bob." "Is it?" Bob challenged. "Run the 651 pattern against the binary sequence of the signal. If it opens a new block of data, then your atmospheric artifact just became the biggest discovery in human history." She hesitated for a long moment, the fear of what she might find fighting with the thrill of the puzzle. She was a scientist. She chased data. She typed the sequence, entered the rhythm as a key into the signal analysis software. The screen flashed red, then green, and a new massive data block, previously unseen, popped up in the system memory. It was encoded, but clearly not random. She stared, the color draining from her face. It worked. It's a log file. And it's enormous. Millions of entries. Bob simply nodded, his eyes wide with a terrifying kind of vindication. "The back door is open, Doctor. Now we find out what the masters are planning for their prodigal slaves." They had a key, but the lock they had just picked was the history of humankind. The realization that they were reading a log of their own creation chilled them to the bone. What kind of log would contain the records of our earliest days?
The next 48 hours passed in a blur of caffeine, energy drinks, and the dizzying realization that they were deciphering the cosmic equivalent of a server migration log. Bob and Kat, forgetting their rank and their initial animosity, worked shoulder to shoulder, their shared intellectual high overriding their fatigue. Kat's cryptographer training was invaluable. She recognized the complex, repeating algorithms that served as timestamps and identifiers within the massive data dump. "The language structure, it's a high-level command syntax," Kat murmured, rubbing her temples. She wore a pair of Bob's old aviation headphones to keep the low-pulsing signal from driving her mad. "It uses an almost entirely mathematical lexicon. No emotion, no poetry, just efficiency. It's exactly how a superior intelligence would document a large, messy project." Bob was cross-referencing the geo-coordinates they managed to translate from the log's metadata. He was hunched over a 3D holographic map of the Earth, a modern tool overlaying ancient tragedies. "Messy project is right," Bob grumbled, pointing to a spot on the map far beneath the surface of the Black Sea. "Entry stamp T350,000. Action, System-Wide Reset Protocol 7A. Initial phase, Hydrological Redistribution." Kat looked up, her expression grim. "Hydrological redistribution? That sounds cold. What exactly was redistributed?" "Water," Bob said, his voice flat. He traced a line across the Middle East. The coordinates are all lining up with documented archaeological sites lost to a great flood. Not just the usual biblical suspects. We're talking Sumer, the Indus Valley, even early settlements in the Mississippi Basin, 150 feet underwater. The scale is global, Kat, not localized. This wasn't a weather event. Kat zoomed in on the Black Sea region. "Wait, look at the timeline. According to this log, the redistribution was rapid. Geologists estimate the Black Sea Basin flooded gradually over thousands of years.
This log says it happened in a matter of days. It's like someone turned on a faucet from a very big reservoir. Exactly, Bob said, pushing back from the console. He walked over to the break table and poured himself another cup of coffee. He was getting irritable, snapping at the slightest noise. The weight of the discovery was pressing down on him. They fell into a heated, intellectual dispute, a necessary event for the terrifying conclusions they were drawing. That's a giant leap, Bob. Genocide by water? Why? Why not just turn off our brainstems? Kat challenged, her voice rising. If they were so superior, why the dramatic, messy solution? Why leave survivors? Inertia, Doctor, Bob said, leaning against the cold metal cabinet, his humor a little brittle. They were efficient. They didn't want to destroy the planet, just the problem. Flooding large continental shelves is faster than manually exterminating the entire population. They saved a few, the ones they considered salvageable, the loyalists maybe, and then they left a warning. This signal. It's a black box recording of the slave revolt and the subsequent cleanup. Kat stared at the scrolling data, the weight of the historical trauma palpable in the cold clinical entries. The data confirmed the alternative history. The story of our self-made ascent was a lie. We were livestock who had broken out of the pen. And what about the program? Kat asked, her voice quiet. You said we were engineered to be slaves. What does the log say about us? What did they put in our genetic code? Bob brought up a different section of the log, labeled Project Genome E, Constraints. This is the chilling part. The constraints aren't about brute strength or obedience. They're subtle, self-doubt, short lifespan, the endless, insatiable desire for gold and resources, the things our masters wanted. And the most elegant piece of programming, division. We're hardwired to fight each other, to establish hierarchies, to constantly seek the approval of an absent authority figure. We are perpetually distracted from the main issue. We are free now, but we don't know how to be free. The realization hit Kat with the force of a physical blow. Her own competitive nature, her drive to prove herself right, was that just a residual program? The American drive for success, the hustle, the 24/7 work ethic, was it a slave program masquerading as the American dream? So, what's the current log entry? Kat asked, her hand shaking slightly. If the old entries are a journal of the past, what is the signal doing now? Bob scrolled to the most recent timestamp. The entry was short, terrifyingly brief. Query, Project Genome E, status, awaiting response. The signal wasn't just a record, it was an active piece of technology, a cosmic sensor, checking the status of its creation. But the terrifying part wasn't the query itself, it was the implied arrival. What happens when the system stops querying and starts sending a team?
The air in the bunker had grown thick with unspoken panic. The log entry, Query, Project Genome E status, awaiting response, was a digital punch to the gut. Bob and Kat knew that their use of the Biascara 51 key to access the archives was not a quiet research project. It was a loud, high-priority notification sent across unimaginable distances. They had effectively pinged the server of their former masters. The philosophical weight of their discovery now gave way to immediate tactical anxiety. They're not monitoring us continuously, Kat reasoned, pacing the small room. She used her technical jargon to anchor herself in reality. The query is intermittent, perhaps once every 1,000 Earth years, but our access tripped a flag. We moved the data, Bob. We showed activity where there should have been silence. It's like ringing the doorbell of an empty house, Bob countered, staring at the flashing signal light. And the light came on. Now they know someone's home. The question is, are they sending a maintenance crew or an exterminator? Their frantic planning was abruptly interrupted by a sharp, electronic alert that overrode the internal speakers. It wasn't the cosmic signal. It was the base's automated defense system. A cold, synthesized voice echoed through the command room. Unauthorized protocol breach detected. 1.7 gigahertz antenna array. Command directive. Full technical stand-down and personnel transfer in T-3 hours. Immediate compliance required.
Kat slammed her hand on the console. There it is, not the Annunaki, our masters. The Department of Defense sees an anomaly, a technical glitch, and their protocol is always the same: block, silence, and replace. They're sending a team of dull, gray bureaucrats to wipe the system, and us with it. This was the perfect, terrifying twist of fate. Not a Hollywood-style invasion, but a boring, bureaucratic closure. The true masters of humanity, fear and institutional inertia, were coming to shut down the truth. Bob, the hardened patriot, looked at the U.S. flag pinned above the main console. The pursuit of truth, enshrined in the American spirit, was now colliding violently with the need for operational security. We have 3 hours to decide how we want to spend the rest of our lives, in a high-security holding cell, or as the only 2 people on Earth who know the truth. They had one last, desperate opportunity. The 1.7 gigahertz antenna array was the most powerful transmitter on the continent, designed to blast communications past the atmosphere. If they could hijack the system, they could send a reply back to the whispering sky. "We have to send something," Bob insisted, his jaw clenched. "We can't just let them reset us to factory settings." "But what, Bob? What do we say to our creators?" Kat demanded, her voice thick with panic and adrenaline. "A plea for mercy? A declaration of war?" Bob walked to the main array controls, his military training taking over. He thought about the centuries of human struggle, the Revolutionary War, the Civil Rights Movement, the endless fight for self-determination that defined America. It wasn't about superior genetics, it was about choice. "We send them the one thing they didn't program into us," Bob said. "We don't send data. We send proof of consciousness, something so complex, so spontaneous, that it violates the constraints of their Project Genome E. We prove that the slave has become a person." Kat, realizing the immense patriotic weight of his plan, a declaration of independence on a cosmic scale, sat down at the crypto terminal. "If this is a black box, it's a two-way street. By sending a reply, we are effectively setting off a global alarm. We are confirming that the product is sentient and rebellious. We are asking for the next flood, Bob." "Maybe," Bob conceded, his hand hovering over the override button, the final, irrevocable choice. "But what's the American way, Doctor? To live as happy, programmed slaves, or to risk everything for the dignity of knowing who we are, even if it brings down the fire? I vote for the fire." Kat looked at the screen, at the clean, cold log entry that defined humanity as a query. Then she looked at Bob, a tired veteran fighting for an idea bigger than himself. She nodded, her eyes blazing with fierce intellectual resolve. "Give me 5 minutes," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I can generate a short sequence, not a language, a pure, non-algorithmic statement of self, a mathematical expression of the human soul, the one thing they never intended to create." The clock on the console ticked down with merciless speed. They were 2 lone Americans in the desert, deciding the fate of all humanity. Their choice, silence or a scream, would echo across the void.
Chapter 5. The reply begins. With less than 30 minutes remaining until the government shutdown team arrived, the air in the bunker was electrifying. Kat had distilled the ultimate statement of humanity into a compressed, high-frequency burst. It wasn't poetry or philosophy. It was a pure mathematical expression of non-linearity, a pattern that could only be generated by a consciousness that had achieved self-awareness beyond its original programming. "The core sequence is ready," Kat whispered, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep and adrenaline. "It's a fractal signature. They'll know it's deliberate. They'll know we broke the code." Bob had already run the transmission protocol override. The massive 1.7 gigahertz antenna array outside, usually pointed at a dull geostationary orbit, was now aimed precisely at the coordinates logged in the BS Saqqara 51 archive, the supposed origin point of the Annunaki. He could feel the low thrum of power surging through the copper wiring, preparing for the broadcast. "You fired the sequence, Bob," he instructed, his hand hovering over the master transmit switch. "This is it, Kat. the most important transmission in human history. I know, she replied, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. This is our 4th of July, Bob. Only instead of declaring independence from a king, we're declaring it from our creators. 3, 2, 1. Transmit! Kat slammed the execute key. For a split second, the bunker was enveloped in an intense high-frequency whine. The console lights flickered, and the power meter on the wall briefly pegged to the maximum. A wave of energy, carrying the fractal signature of human self-awareness, shot into the cold, uncaring cosmos. Transmission successful. The message was gone. A deep, unsettling silence followed the noise, punctuated only by the distant, high-pitched whine of tires crunching gravel outside the security perimeter. The technical stand-down team had arrived. "They're here," Bob said, walking calmly back to his main console. He was no longer the skeptical veteran. He was a man who had completed his mission. He looked at the screen one last time, where the query, Project Genome E-status, awaiting response entry, still blinked. Then the final, chilling piece of data appeared. The query entry didn't update with a timestamp or an acknowledgement. It didn't send an error message. It simply vanished. The entire sequence, the rhythmic 651 signal of the whispering sky, the background noise, the BS Sakara 51 entry, it all dissolved from the system display. "They saw it," Kat whispered, her eyes fixed on the empty screen. "They received the reply, and now they've gone dark." The heavy steel door of the command room burst open. Standing there were 3 impeccably dressed men in dark suits, carrying official, albeit generic, briefcases. Not the menacing men in black of conspiracy lore, but precisely the boring middle management types who enforce bureaucratic silence. "Mr. Clark, Dr. Reed, I am Agent Miller from the Inspector General's office. You are in violation of multiple classified protocols. Please stand away from the consoles." Agent Miller's voice was utterly devoid of emotion, the perfect antithesis to the passion that had just saved or doomed humanity. Bob simply smiled, a tired, relieved smile. He placed the worn Sumerian book on the empty console. "We were just concluding our research, Agent. We found out why we're here." As the agents moved to cuff them, Bob met Kat's eyes. They were both terrified, facing administrative purgatory or worse, but they had acted. They had chosen freedom over silence. The official narrative would be restored. The signal would be written off as equipment malfunction. The data would be purged and classified. But Bob and Kat knew the truth. The masters had been served notice. We were built to be slaves, but we found our own will. The silence in the cosmos now was not indifference. It was the sound of a creator receiving an unexpected and profoundly human reply.